tornando uma coisa que com menos efeitos colaterais possíveis e mais eficiência. É esse o objetivo do medicamento, né? Certo?
1, 2, 1, 2, som teste. Bom dia a todos, testando cabine e tradução simultânea. Teste para o streaming. 1, 2, 1, 2, som teste. Testando tradução. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, som teste.
Corta seu som um pouquinho, por favor.
1, 2, 1, 2, teste streaming. 1, 2, 1, 2, testando tradução simultânea. 1, 2, som teste para o streaming. 1, 2, 1, 2, som teste. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2, teste streaming. 1, 2, tá tudo bem, beleza? Good afternoon, everyone. Today we begin with another panel for the first SPCine Forum. Today we're going to have the panel on the promotion and investments in economic development. To make up our panel, I'd like to invite Karen Castanho, who's going to be the mediator of this panel. Aline Oliveira Cordeiro, representing FORUM Cultura. Deborah Ivanov, representing the Union for the Audiovisual Industry of the State of São Paulo. Bárbara Oliveira, representing the Brazilian Development Bank. And Leo Edge, representing SECAF. Before giving the floor to our panel members, I'd like to remind you that questions from the audience are going to be collected. In the YouTube description, you'll see the link for this space for questions and comments. Now I pass the floor to Karen. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Castanho. I am co-founder of Bionica Filmes. I'm white female. I'm wearing a leather jacket and a gray skirt. The format of our panel is going to begin with the introduction of each one of the panel members. They're going to focus on the promotion and investments for our industry. Then we're going to open up for questions to each one of the panel members, and finally questions from the audience, 4 in total. Deborah is going to focus this new management of Spcine, and Lini is going to talk about FORUM Cultura and regional arrangements, and Bárbara about the experience of the Brazilian Development Bank for the audiovisual industry, and Leo is going to talk about the new challenges and also capacity building of our professionals. We are very happy to have another day of the forum. We are happy with the new decree of our industry. It's an honor to be here. I'd like to thank and congratulate SPCine for this initiative. I believe this first forum is going to be a landmark as a recovery post-pandemic. Deborah is going to speak first to give us an overview, and then we pass the floor to Aline, Bárbara, and then Leo. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. I'd like to thank SPCine for organizing this event and also to think about the main challenges, to put together the professionals to think about the main challenges we have ahead. My name is Deborah Ivanov. I'm white. I have a caramel hair. I'm wearing black pants and a green blouse. I am a co-founder of Orca Filmes. I was director of the National Movie Agency. We're here to talk about the challenges we have today. I see this as a special moment for the audiovisual industry and a very promising one. On the one side, we have the big streaming platforms and the local production we see all over the world, including Brazil. On the one hand, we see this market booming, and on the other hand, we have Spcine, which is the National Movie Agency. which is now strengthened. We see this with the recovery of the sectorial fund. We have a promising future ahead of us, but of course, full of challenges. I'm going to approach public promotion, especially on the federal level. All federal activities impact the states and municipalities because these kind of finance affect multiple sectors. So I'm going to talk about these lines of credit. I'd like to greet, first of all, the return of institutional safety of the National Cinema Agency. I believe this is a landmark in the past 7 months. We have seen 3 new directors that are going to have a stable kind of management. Just to remind you, we had turbulent years in the past. In the past 2 years, we had an institutional void. We had a substitution of the leaders of Spcine without the powers to run safely the agency. So I consider that October marks a very important moment for us. In the past 7 months, we had the announcement of more than 1 billion reais in investment for lines of production, distribution, infrastructure, and training. So it is very promising indeed. I'm going to highlight now some of the challenges we have ahead to enhance our business. As I was commenting to Karen, this is very hard to face. We have different challenges, but I selected 2 that I considered the main axes for the short and long terms. The first one refers to simplifying and revision of processes of the National Cinema Agency. This includes revision and unification of rules. We have 6 different fiscal incentives, different ones, including FONCINE, and we have Fundo Setorial. That is 7 completely different lines of credit that were created in with different rules over the past 7 years. It's very difficult to put them all together. They have different terms, and this unifying of rules is very important to all of us. We have begun to unify all of those rules before the launch of the invitations to bid. And among the proposals is one of putting together all these rules within one single structure. Of course, there's a lot to do, and we expect to have all unified within this year or next year. And another important point, when we talk about simplification, we include accountability. I'm not going to go deep into this because this is a topic that is part of our day-to-day life, and we are undergoing times of insecurity and problems as to accountability. Just as a result of this process, Spcine will have all the means to propose bolder rules, if you will, as to accountability. We're not going to go into this topic in detail, but here I believe is the great challenge to have a legal structure or legal framework approved by the National Congress that can regulate accountability and other aspects of our audiovisual industry, bringing safety or security to all the sector and also to us, professionals of the field. I believe this is an objective we want to achieve. And of course, this involves a changing of rules of SPCine, which depends on the new legal framework. The second axis that I see as major in our field has to do with rights. When we stop and think, we see that several fiscal incentives hamper the possibility of producers to make their works feasible and profitable. Many of those fiscal incentives, according to the current rules, are part of the share in the revenues. We have giant companies that invest in our works with fiscal incentives and retain most of those rights. How to think about sustainability and advancements if we have little of these future rights? This was a model that was made sense when the structure was created, which was to give incentives to the big players. It was excellent at that time, but today we know that it's healthy for all parts, and now it's time to revisit those rights. And again, about rights, the biggest challenge of all, as I see it, is regulating the VOD. This regulation is advancing worldwide. This is the fastest growing market in the world. Brazil stands as the 5 biggest consumers of streaming in the world. For some of these platforms, we're the second consuming market in the world. It is past due to see an advancement in VOD so that rights are guaranteed, at least in a small percentage of this production, be in the hands of Brazilian independent entrepreneurs, and also a contribution and investment to the development of our market. There are several other axes, but I'm going to just focus on these 2 main axes. Also, a very important achievement that we had in this new SPCine management was the creation of the Technical Chamber of Production. There was a chamber for distribution and exhibition. Now we have a chamber that allows producers to take their contributions for improvements, and also to have a proper forum for fostering dialogue between the industry and the agency. We have representatives of the industry from different parts of the country and of different sizes. Of course, this is a difficult task. We must have some assertive contributions so that we contribute effectively to the improvement of our industry. It seems, I don't know if I'm right, yesterday there was a public consultation about the inclusion and the audiovisual law for dissemination, preservation, and capacity building, which I believe it's really important for us. This is another challenge we have ahead of us. It is important that we are able to put together the links of our chain in the audiovisual law. I believe these are the points I consider important for our future. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. I'd like to thank SPCine for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here to share some of the experience of Cultura of my state, Pernambuco, with all of you. My name is Aline Oliveira. I am supervisor of Cultura. I am a colored person. I'm wearing jeans and a flowery blouse. Cultura Pernambuco is a Pernambuco fund to manage culture. It deals with the cultural heritage of the state of Pernambuco. The financial bulk of our Cultura is 32 million reais, and for audiovisual is specifically 9,280,000 reais. This division of resources is by law. The fund was created in 2002. This year we're celebrating 20 years. It is a solid fund. 20 years. We can consider this as a state fund and not only government fund. Cultura is here to stay. The first audiovisual took place in 2007 and the first call to bid in 2002. This was really important because before, the initiatives was part of a single invitation to bid, which included other cultural areas. The specifications within the call for bids was not very specific. As of 2007, with our own invitation to bid, we now have in Pernambuco the emergence, what we call movie making from the state of Pernambuco, which has been successful either here in Brazil, both here in Brazil and in foreign countries. Productions are usually concentrated in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, but Pernambuco has had a successful experience. Besides the talent of our artists, most of this success is due to the promotion of culture through Cultura. In the audiovisual industry, we have several categories. For example, we have product for television, research, preservation, train and scenic clubs, games. In other words, it's very diverse. For feature films, we have an allocated fund. Today, it's not possible to have a feature film with 700,000 reais, which is our resources to be allocated for this kind of movies. We have other incentives as well, but what we see is that the starting point is Cultura. It's just like Cultura would be a letter of reference so that producers may be able to capture resources for their projects. Perhaps for those who do not know Cultura, I would like to mention some of our projects and also some producers that were able to achieve a lot of visibility. And the most recent one was Bacurau. Kleber Mendonça was an ascending director from Som Redor with incentive of Cultura and also the movie Aquarius. And now it is really famous all over Brazil with this new production. A big challenge we have in our state, Pernambuco, is to put those productions in movie theaters, and Bacurau was able to break all this barrier. was awarded prizes all over the world. It was in streaming. It was present in different movie theaters. We have producers and production companies that were part of all this. A lot of what we see today outside São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro comes from my state, Pernambuco. And majority of productions with incentives from Cultura. As of 2014, the invitation to bid from Cultura received a support from the FSA through regional invitations to bid. An invitation to bid, which is 9,800,000 2017, was 27 million reais. 10 million from the state of Pernambuco and 15 million from the sectorial fund for audiovisual. The last invitation to bid we launched was in 2020. It had resources from RSA because it had been approved in the last call, which was in 2018. It was approved back then in 2018, and because of red tape and bureaucracy, we were not able to receive this money according to 2019 ITB. These resources were postponed for 2020, but it was due to the call for bids of 2018. It was very hard to build the invitation to build with 9,800,000 with so many professionals or good professionals available, but with limited resources. We expect and are hopeful that SPCine really recovers and moves forward, not only in the state of Pernambuco, but we have other states which are producing a lot, like the states of Bahia and Será. We believe those invitations to bid for resources besides FSA, it foresees 30% resources for the north and northeastern regions of Brazil to democratize those resources all over Brazil. It is important to see this resurgence in the state of Pernambuco. Unfortunately, producers do need government grants. Even when they had resources from Petrobras and Caixa Cultural, we see that these resources are more and more difficult to be captured. That is why this recovery is important. In the past 10 years, just to give you an idea of how important it is, in the past 10 years, 162 million reais were invested in our state, of which 113 were from Cultura and 48 from FSA, and 48 million reais in 2014, from 2014 to today. Between 2014 and 2018, the last call was 2018. It is a good amount of resources in a short period of time, and this was significant for us to be able to go ahead with those productions. As I was previously mentioning, Cultura has been active for the past 20 years, and along this time we see, or rather it is an achievement of the productive chain that does culture in Pernambuco as well as artists as a whole. I believe that Cultura will be perennial. Besides the cultural chain of the state, I believe it is important to have laws, legislation, decrees, and norms that, apart from helping the fund, it also protects our category. That is why I believe it's important to have them. And we have not only for Cultura, we also have specific laws for the audiovisual industry. There is a specific decree for audiovisuals. In this law, there is a topic to create a board. It's a peer board because it counts with 9 government members and 9 members from the civil society, and nominated by representatives from different categories. It is a wonderful achievement. The law was established in 2014, and with this law, the board was created. The board participates actively not only in the building of invitations to build and distribution of resources within different categories, but also the board follows up all the movements the government does when they act. So any kind of action government produces regarding the public policies of audiovisual is followed up. In other words, civil society actively produces or participates in the production of culture and its processes, so that this policy, for any reason, be lost. This is really important because in the current political instability we are undergoing, we have to guarantee that these mechanisms of funding will not be empty when governments change. Well, I believe this is it. I overdue my time, and I pass the floor on to my colleague. Thank you.
You touched a very important point, that it is a state policy and not a government policy. That connects with what Deborah said before. I think Barbara can complement with her experiment of the BNDES, with her experience in the industry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara. I have dark hair, white skin. I'm wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. I would like to thank the invitation for this event, and I think it's important for us to think about the recovery of the industry that was severely affected by the pandemic. And I think this is a perfect moment for us to get together and talk about the problems we are facing. I am a manager, economy manager for creative manager for BNDES. I have been working since 2014 in this area. And BNDES is the National Bank for Social Development. So it's an important instrument for the economic development. When we think about public policies, BNDES is used for putting policies into practice. And the audiovisual industry, the proximity of the bank with the audiovisual industry comes from 1995, when the bank began with bids for and prizes that at the time, basically it was a support by grants that which allowed BNDES to get closer to the industry and to understand the specificities of the industry, and to think how to support with credit for an industry that needed funds. And so how did BNDES could attend the specificity of an industry that had very small companies that had little experience in credit or funding, or no experience at all, little commitment with governance. I'm talking way back before 1995. And to give incentives to this industry to professionalize itself without losing sight of the importance that we are a bank, then that we would have to follow the credit policies available. And at the time, we did direct financing. We acted directly without using indirect agents. We only had operations over 10 million reais with guarantees, and we also had risk classification of the companies that took these funds, and these are companies that weren't big enough to take 10 million reais. Companies that sometimes didn't even have a balance sheet. So how could we classify the risk of these companies? And they didn't reach the minimum in which the bank operates. They didn't have guarantees. The only assets that they had were intangible assets. And thinking about the audiovisual industry in a broader way, and not only the producers, the theaters, the space, to give into guarantees. So how can we think, how can we come to give financing to these firms that didn't have any kind of guarantees, over 10,000 highs. So we had to structure a specific program for the culture industry, not only audiovisual, which was the ProCult, the program for the development of culture, and ProCult was specific to this area. So what we had to do to allow the market to enter the credit, we had to lower from 10 million to 1 million to make more flexible the guarantees and not work with the current ratings for risk, and so that they could have access to these funds. And besides this, we had to have a blend, a mix of fundings to be able to dilute the costs. For example, for the producing companies, we would take a part within a single operation. We would take a part of credit and another part of equal value with the first article, so the company could have access to credit, access to the first credit, and that could dilute the cost of those funds. For the production companies, we thought about operating with the FSA, the financial agent for the audiovisual industry. We work closely with Ancini, and there we were working with these movie close to you to bring new theater rooms, and these were family-held companies, very small companies. So we would have to decentralize the movie theaters. We had to move or to create different spaces in other places. So we mixed these resources together with the BNDES, with a larger part from resources of FSA, all in credit. And we were able to create these movie theaters with a different kind of guarantee, which is the box office revenues. So we were able to allow these companies to enter this credit market. And something that we saw back then when we began to do these proposals of bidding, a characteristic of the production companies was to have the resources, to capture these resources for a production. They concluded that production, and when they finished, they didn't have the funds to end the production, so they had once more to go after funds, and in between productions they had to let go of the labor that they had available, and they have to rehire people for filming and to do the production whenever they had the funds available. So what Prakut wanted to give incentive to was a creative nucleus or a creative core to finance the workforce for different projects and different maturity lines, maturity stages. So you would be able to have a portfolio. So Procucci was very focused in supporting the companies in the creation of corporate projects that would be the implementation of a creative nucleus or creative center, something that would give more structure to the company. And Procut supported a business plan, a portfolio. And with this, that company was able to generate and always be in production and growing as well. So I think that this experience of Procucci was something that we bring for future contacts, and it has been a very good learning to deal with this industry and the specificities of the industry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elieldo Ergi, president of SECAD, which is the Syndicate of Audiovisual Industry. I have black hair. I have a black blazer and black trousers. And I think that we have heard a lot about economic development, which is to support and foster the economic development of the cities, states, and countries. And different points of view have shown results of these investments, and also the need of a constant cycle of funding and fostering the audiovisual industry. As in the case of Pernambuco, that has worldwide known films, so they have a cinematographic industry, and that depends of Cultura, not only today but also in the future. And my congratulations for the solidity and for having a legislation. As Deborah mentioned as well, we need legal frameworks to become a state policy for cultural and audiovisual industry. So when we are developing economically at the peak, we have a bottleneck in fostering the market, and then we restart to retake or recover the market. And Agolani, for São Paulo and Brazil in terms of economic development, is much higher than it was back then. There's a noticeable growth, and as Barbara mentioned, sometimes the company didn't even have a governance or a balance sheet, and with the help of BNDES, Procult was extremely important. We miss Procult, everybody knows that, so that the company would be able to enter credit so as not to depend solely on private investments or other investors or public policies. This is still a problem for us, the access to credit. Credit in Brazil is very expensive, and the audiovisual productions have a production cycle that is very long. So to take credit, to make a film and release the film, you have interests that are prohibitive in terms of Brazil. In this line of economic development, we have some elements here that are the positive impacts that I'm going to mention now. We obviously have the issue of production that demands research, distribution, this asset of the audiovisual, that we reach 68 segments of the economy. The last study of Olsberg, which was mentioned yesterday, is almost 70% of the budget for audiovisual go to other industry, to these other 68 segments of the industry. So only in this line of audiovisual productions you already have an answer of where this investment goes to. When you invest in a production, you are investing in the in locals and in local spaces, in structure, in the logistics. So 70% of this go to other sectors of the industry, and we have an issue with infrastructure, which is the investment for infrastructure. BNDES does investments for infrastructures in states and municipalities. When you build a movie theater, for example, or a creative center, production center, we see this worldwide. Spain is creating Madrid Creativa, which is a huge center with studios, shopping centers, stores, production companies. This is not an endowment. It is due to the economic development of the cities, of the country. Spain has become a power in this industry with productions such as Casa de Papel. Several series were also released as well. So this is another point for the audiovisual, not only for the audiovisual industry. There's the popcorn selling, there are restaurants, there are parking lots. The movement around these infrastructure, and usually these infrastructures that can be called industrial. It's a center for the cinema that attracts the citizens and not repels them. When you build an industry, you need a physical space that is reserved for these activities. You have the industrial residues that doesn't allow for the citizens to attend these spaces. Only the Americans that make a lot of money with this kind of tourism. Another important point, and that I would say that it depends on this, is the legal security framework. It is important to have this security, which is no different than other industry. If we don't have an institutional security, if our agency or regulation agency and a supporting agency, we can't have a forecast or planning to develop ourselves as a company, and then BNDES won't lend us any money because there's no security. How can I give security to a partner, be it a bank or a private investor, if I don't have legal and institutional security as well? And another point that the audiovisual brings in terms of economic development is the imaging, the soft power that we bring, not only the images related, and once again the catch rate. I'd like to congratulate SPCine and the state of São Paulo that is flying high with this. I was joking yesterday that this dispute between São Paulo and Rio is good for us. I come to São Paulo saying what the mayor of Rio de Janeiro said, and vice versa. And this only improves the image of the cities in the last global index for knowledge that deals with soft power. In different countries, Brazil is known as a friendly, with friendly people, receptive people, but on the other hand, it's not recognized by its industry. There's a strong commodity industry, but it's more well known due to corruption and other negative aspects. We have to improve internally, but we also have to transmit a positive image of our country. It's not only saying, oh, everything is okay, and making films about love and happiness, but culture always shows a better side of a country. It tends to show the bright side of things. I can say that Pernambuco is recognized worldwide. They have marvelous landscapes, but audiovisual industry is what put Pernambuco in the world view, and especially self-esteem, which is a vital point for economic development. You hire people, people see themselves on the screens as citizens, and then you reduce the problems of public security, public safety. And I'm trying to make a link here. It seems like a conspiracy theory, but just to wrap up, let's talk about training, labor capacitation, and every kind of qualification is important. And in this boom moment, with investments in productions, and it has to increase as well, we still have to invest in training and professional training for technicians in the market to work in the market. They have to have a strong background and great knowledge of interpersonal relationships for us to be able to sustain our growth in our industry. Thank you.
I'd like to begin by asking you about professional training. The recovery of our industry came before other sectors with the development of streaming. Now, with the funds of the sectoral funding, we'll certainly have an increase in productions in the next years, and we need to train these people. We lack technicians today and technical people today in all departments. So I'm going to ask Deborah this $1 million question. We hope that the demand continues and be ongoing, but we have a challenge for today. How can we deal with this challenge to put together look for new professionals, and now with the recovery of new federal funding lines, and besides the volume of investment, new ways of productions are being brought due to the platforms, a big volume of investment but little time. On top of that, we have new technologies, both for managing these projects as well as pre- and post-productions, new technical guises and new studies. These production models have accelerated after the pandemic. New productions are coming to the platforms, and they use these new modes. In fact, we were not prepared for this volume and for this new process. And these are learnings that we have to achieve. Just like Karen said, we do not have experienced and qualified labor. It is true that the courses we have here in Brazil are not on par with the needs of our industry. It is fundamental that other short-term actions to train new professionals and to qualify those who already act in the market. We have to give them new tools and new ways to deal with this new reality. The Forum SPCIne now will have a credit line for training, specifically guided for training. We have to see that platforms themselves are investing in training. This requires a technical needs, and this is urgent. I'm talking about unions, institutions, and credit lines, everybody coming together to focus on this fast training with specific training courses. Also, it is important to put together efforts to foster the industry. We're lacking equipment, we're lacking studios. It's amazing to see that we're now lacking these pieces of equipment. We have to get together to face this void. Now, Aline, the role of Cultura in the internationalization and circulation of Brazilian and films that are originated in your state, Pernambuco. Do you feel, with this international nature of Brazilian films, do you feel that the search for productions in Pernambuco has increased, or the search for technicians in Pernambuco and other states has also increased? The productions that come from Pernambuco have taken part in major festivals, not only local ones, but mainly international festivals, like, for example, Lisbon, Cannes, and with the most recent example, the movie Bacurau. We have also other movies like Boi Neon, which was awarded a prize in the Lisbon International Film Festival. Also Rotterdam Festival. We had some projects from Cultura that were awarded prizes. I consider it extremely important, this participation and the prizes that were awarded for our productions. All this help disseminate production and also attract more people, besides strengthening Cultura itself. The government now sees that investing in culture is the right thing to do. The industry now sees this policy or audiovisual policy as a line of business, not only a public policy with a social aspect. And of course, all policies need to have this social aspects, but it has to do with the creation of jobs and also to be profitable. But now people see it as a line of business. Besides strengthening public policies, success of those projects is important, and the entry of these productions in the commercial circles. Besides the feature films, we also have a potential for documentary films. There are several documentary films today that are shown in broadcast television that were funded by Cultura. Most of those broadcast TVs are attracted when these productions are shown internationally. That is why it is extremely important to disseminate our productions. Leo, I believe you have a program for capacity building. I would like you to elaborate a little bit about this training program. What we see today is several challenges at the same time. We usually look only at funding challenges. Some people believe that funding is enough, but we know it goes beyond that. One of the greatest challenges today is professional training. Somehow we have neglected this aspect because we did not have the funding, and accountability was non-existent. Along the past 3 to 4 years, we neglected accountability, and also training was neglected. Please, your word on that. The thing about giving priority to what we're doing has to do with the state policies that must be long-term. If we have legal security, we are able to look at the whole thing. When we need to do that on a day-to-day basis, and this is not a pun, I read a lot of scripts. I am going to read the latest treatment of my script, but at the same time I have to deal with fundraising. As you said, we have diverted our focus. Training in the audiovisual industry as a whole is empirical. A lot of technicians or families that have been working for generations, they have been passing this knowledge from generation to generation. But on the other hand, we need infrastructure, we need labor. We are labor as well for this industry. And SECAP always focused on professional training, specifically on management. As Barbara said, this was something that we lacked in the past. Most of the companies are family-owned companies, specifically on the audiovisual industry. They were companies with their own assets. Let's put up a company to participate in a bid and so on. So we provided capacity building for management specifically, and we have always focused on technicians, basically in SPCine and SESI. We have a serious problem of communication, specifically on audiovisual, that deals with television. A lot of technicians who render services for broadcast televisions were trained by SESI and SPCine. What we're doing today, and Deborah was right about this, we need short-term technical courses. What we have is 2- and 4-year courses to train communicators. Also, what they usually train are screenwriters and directors. Sometimes we see some focus on management. What we have to do now is to bring together our partners, Rio Filmes, Secave, Sirjan, SPCine, LSTC, from Steve, ABC. In other words, to bring everybody together, and also the union of movie-making people to put up some courses and thus provide the market with qualified workers and technicians. This is something we are creating, this kind of training courses. We're going to have people now skilled to begin working in this field. It is important to have those qualified workers. Series in the whole world is something that was a turning point. With the new platforms, series mushroomed. It is a production that takes more time, and they are there for a longer period of time. So we have new products and new windows, and this is the time to make the most of it. Otherwise, Brazil will be more and more expensive to do the shootings, and shortly a country with bad infrastructure. We have some good news because we have a lot today, but the next day platforms can shoot any other place in the world. It's like some broadcast televisions that have their own structures, but movie making is different. They can produce any other place on the planet. So we need to have a structure, including studios, transportation, equipment, but also labor and legislation. This is all part of the infrastructure in order to have an economic development. Barbara, if we put this all together in terms of challenges, how the Brazilian Development Bank has in mind about the new lines of credit. What we see is inflation present all over the world, and in Brazil even stronger, a pressure on the salaries because of the unavailability of professionals, and specifically in the high interest rate, specifically in the past years. Have you given a thought in terms of infrastructure, lines of credit? What does BNDES sees ahead, considering the acquired experience, seeing that the sector has professionalized in the past year, boosted by BNDES mostly? Well, as I mentioned, us, together with FSPCine, have talked a lot about this issue. And back then, in 2020, in the pandemic, we started conversations. Our last operation or funding was 2019. And we were thinking about how we preserve the experience with Procult and without being so burdensome for small operations, something that we were doing, very low tickets, and with the cost, an enormous cost of accountability and also contracts. They were companies that were very costly to us. We are working together with FSPCine and BRDR, institutions that we we fund, thinking about new ways of action. Then the pandemic struck. During the pandemic, we needed to organize ourselves very quickly in order to have new lines of credit and emergency lines of credit. The industry has not been able to pay the loaned money since the start of the pandemic. I'm talking here about the audiovisual sector as a whole. We have just approved suspension of payment of those, the financing that was taken. What we saw is that production companies are not getting their loans. They recovered before the movie theaters that also need our support. And right now we have this major challenge, which is how to support these companies with credit lines that suffered in the past 2 years, specifically the audiovisual industry as a whole. So together with FSPCine, we have just approved a kind of recovery of Procult. But this time we have divided scopes in terms of BNDES and BRDE. BRDE would be in charge of operations below 10 million reais and BNDES above 10 million reais operations. What I feel is that we're going to focus more on infrastructure. FSPCine let it very clear for us to support the infrastructure, including studios and equipment. The larger projects will remain with BNDES, and thinking about funding, and here I'm talking about a portfolio of projects. There's no specific projects. The learning that we had with Procult, we have been using what we learned. And also by streamlining and modernizing technologies. And everything is included in the same package. BNDES is going to be active in business plans, also sensitivity and technological aspects, but mainly in bigger projects. Well, we have some questions here from the audience. I'm going to begin here with Aline, who, besides co-arrangements, what is the where do funds come from besides Cultura? That's a very good question. Cultura comes from ICMS taxes. There is a decree that regulates the legislation that instituted Cultura. It rules and regulates the economic sectors that can contribute to Cultura. There is a national code for economic activity, which pinpoints the companies that want to contribute to Cultura today. We have companies of energy matrix. Neo Energia is the greatest contributor of Cultura. They provide energy for the state of Pernambuco. This company, the Secretariat of Treasury, gives incentives through ICMS tax to this company, and these funds don't go straight to the Neo Energia group or the Fundarp accounts. It goes through the Department of Finance so that financial renouncement is provided to give the funds to Cultura. In 2016, there was another company which was related to gas, Copergás, which is another company from Pernambuco. Today, they are not with us anymore. The Neo Energia group has been part of Cultura since its foundation. So it's just like the government of Pernambuco recognized that ICMS tax here will go straight to culture incentives. And it's important to highlight that the Cultura projects do not have a financial counterpart for the Secretariat of Culture. They have a social counterpart. They need to contribute socially. And how does this go about? The government fosters this project, and afterwards a movie, for example, needs to have a public and free screening. Also, a training. It is mandatory that some places be reserved for students from public schools and distributions, all of it free of charge. This does not mean that producers cannot receive or be paid for these projects. It is possible that, for example, if a feature film covers a box office, they will have a free of charge screening, but also they can have money from box office, and the state is going to subsidize it. The tickets to watch a movie will not be the same because they are subsidized. That is, the price of the ticket is lower. This is a very important policy for us. It fosters the entry of newcomers. Because we do not have a financial counterpart, this fosters the entrance of professionals in the future.
We have another question for Deborah Spcine. Had the pilot initiatives for gamings for the capturing of modeling and fundraising. Spcine approved something similar. Do you know what is the point of view of Spcine in implementing this support for executive? I understand that this is for gaming as well. That's a difficult question because the gamers struggle to have the same status of other audiovisual productions in the support or credit lines. We are going to have a specific line for games. This is extremely important that it increases in size. It's a huge already market, and but for management training, we have seen in the sectorial funding the niche would be for training. This is not specified if it's a training for production or distribution, if it's towards management or towards business. So this is up to the associations that represent the gamers in this sense, and I'm very glad. I didn't know about this proposal from SPCine. I think it's great because I think animation is a different kind of production model, and there are very many small companies that need to strengthen themselves and strengthen their management and governance to be able to grow and have access to other markets, to international markets, etc. And Barbara, I have a question about the strategies of BNDES to give incentive to emerging production companies. I think there's the initiative Garagem, and is there a view for economic creative economy? The Garage was not specific for creative economy, but the companies for creative economy could participate as well. I think it was a success. The Garaging was a success, but specific for creative economy, we don't have anything yet, but it can be an option, certainly. Yes, exactly. And the workers themselves they give consulting to these companies, which are startup companies. So this was a very exciting experience for us. There's a last question here for Leo. Is the right skills? What about the costs for this? Is there any initiative to solve these problems? And do you have this point of view? Is there resistance for this? No, I don't see this. Quite the contrary. I'd like to talk about interns. There are no interns in our production because they are under a specific law that they can only work up to 6 hours. So I'd like to change this term. We have changed this term, so an intern is no longer used, the term intern. You can use another term, junior professional, but the trainee itself, if he is under a state law that has a specific requirements, but we are bringing in new professionals to for these new professionals end up recycling the professionals or training the professionals that are already there. We bring different people to have diversity in terms of renewal of professionals, and these new professionals learn by practicing, by making, by doing. So what we are doing is giving them a theoretical and practical basis, but also the labor relations, how to behave in the set, what makes what each team does, because most of the professionals that come into practice on the set, not on a classroom, for example, they lose themselves. They know technically what has to be done. They know about lighting, they know about camera, but they lose themselves in the labor relations. What is my function? How do I coexist with the other professionals? So you see that many people are isolated on the set, and we all know that we have to work together. People have to know all the other functions. So each element of the set is important. So that would be it. This training movement, mass training movement, if possible, is to give basic elements of labor relations, relationship in the set, compliance, sexual harassment, for example. This is all part of the governance, and give them possibility to grow in practice, but with a solid base, because they are our hands on the set. They represent ourselves in the set, and we have, as a company, this obligation to give this training, this capacity for these professionals to be able to execute their work and have a good experience and represent us in the set. Yes, I agree with Leo. I think the production companies are trying to get these interns. Some people have been hired as interns. We need always more people. We can't think about content for the new generations. So, in fact, we want these people to be involved, especially because they can be the bridge between the production companies and the set in these new management techniques. And there's the production companies have accountability as to their investors. I think we are out of time. I would like to thank everyone. It was very interesting to listen to all of you. For me, it is very clear that there are several challenges, and when we put this all together, we will be more able to attract private investments in the future. And I think there's something important that us here in this room are conscious of the importance of our activities and the impact in terms of labor, taxes, and the economic development, not specifically to the industry, but for the economy as a whole. So it's important to take our experience to other segments of society. We also need their support to be able to build these public policies, to mobilize the public entities to give us safety, for us to continue doing what we do very well. And I think that at Bionica, everyone works in a ship. Each one has its role and does it well, but everyone needs to row together, so to speak, at the same pace and in the same direction. So each one has to work together with all of the others so that we can have a sustainable and perpetuous recovery. Thank you very much, Aline and SPCine, and all our guest speakers. Thank you very much, Karen, for your mediation, and all the guest speakers. We have thought about this table especially to understand the different responsibility of the different layers of government, the local government, the federal government, and the state government. So they have to we see different parts to play in each one of these levels. And together with the industry, we can stand for the agenda that we have for the recovery during the next years. Thank you very much for the guests, and we will return at 2:00 p.m. Thank you very much.